again, thank you very much for making the time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Upon introducing that legislation, the Prime Minister said that he would ultimately, or the federal government ultimately, would not impose one of those projects in the national interest on a province that didn't want it, and that there would need to be, he used the word, consensus. Since the Premier of BC seems pretty dead set on opposition to a new pipeline from your province through his, where does that leave your pitch?
Well, I think everybody is focusing on one particular project, and I'm not sure why people aren't asking the question about uranium mines perhaps being approved in Saskatchewan, or there's a golden diamond in British Columbia where they think if they have 6 or 7 different mining projects to be approved. In Manitoba, they've just approved a gold mine for the first time in 15 years. So mining in itself is making a resurgence. I'm very glad to see that. I'm rooting for all of my provincial neighbors. I want to do everything I can to support them, and I think that that's the spirit that will prevail. We've got transmission projects and linear pipeline projects that are going to require provincial coordination, and I'm very encouraged at the conversation that we're already having at the Premier's table. There's some things that we need to do to address some of the objections, but I think that the Team Canada spirit's going to prevail in the end.
So that strikes me as a major shift in tone from you. In particular, are you trying to say that a pipeline that carries oil from Alberta through to BC is not the be-all, end-all?
No, I'm saying that I'm going to convince David Eby of it, because I know that this is good for the country. I know that he's on Team Canada, and I can't imagine in the end that if we meet the issues that have been raised by British Columbia, that he would go off Team Canada. That doesn't seem to me to be the type of person that David Eby is. I think there's some concerns we have to address. We have to have a proponent. We have to make sure that we have a route. We've got to make sure we've got Indigenous buy-in. But in the end, I mean, we did get 2 pipelines built to the coast. We got the Trans Mountain pipeline built. We got the Coastal GasLink built. That was under a more hostile federal government. And I think that it's because we addressed the objections. And that's our job. We're going to make sure that we address the objections, and we're going to get it built.
Do you think inherently, though, those objections can be addressed? In particular, this week when you were talking about a pipeline from Alberta to the northwest of British Columbia. And I ask because I think back to Northern Gateway, when there was a federal government who did want to see that project built, and ultimately the courts decided against the federal government and the process they had put in place, determining that the consultation for Indigenous people did not live up to the expectation that had been set out by law. The Indigenous groups that have come forward already this week, in particular, for example, the Assembly of First Nations, are voicing concern just about the language used by the federal government. They feel as though even after meeting with the Prime Minister, the National Chief was talking about how there's an emergency meeting, for example, now to talk about how they're going to navigate what the federal government is proposing to do. Do you really think that those kinds of objections can be adequately addressed in a project like the one you want to see built?
Well, a 1 million barrel a day pipeline would generate $22 billion in GDP, which is of which about 40% goes to government, half to us and half to the federal government, which can go to address all of the concerns that we have about building new infrastructure, schools, hospitals, roads, other infrastructure. That's the kind of national interest that we've got to be thinking of. I'm going to tell you, there isn't going to be a single project on the national projects list that comes close to that scale. So I think that that's what we have to be talking about, is since we all win, let's figure out a way to address the objections. I think we have gone far advanced on issues with our Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation of being able to create an avenue to get equity ownership by numerous Indigenous bands. We already have $700 million worth of projects we've underwritten and several more in the works. So I think that some of those mechanisms are far more developed than they were when Northern Gate was just being considered. And I'm looking forward to it. Again, a spirit of cooperation. If we're on Team Canada, it also means being on Team Alberta. And I think it would be a sad statement on the country if every single other project is allowed to go ahead, except for the one that's a priority for Alberta. I just don't think that that's where the public is at right now.
I want to pick up on the point on decarbonization, and in particular that Pathways project. You have pitched sort of this grand bargain, right? Get the pipeline built. Some of that $22 billion that you referenced could be used to help support the development of that project. There's already numerous tax credits at the provincial and federal level in place that would help develop that project as well. Why are you prepared to give more money that could go to hospitals, that could go to roads, that could go to education? Why are you prepared to send more money to oil companies that are making record profits? Why do we keep having to help them do the right thing?
Well, because I think when the Pathways project came forward, it's all cost with no additional revenue associated with it. That's why I think coupling it with a new pipeline where you can get a million barrels a day more to market, that actually becomes the revenue stream that allows for a better partnership with industry and a better cost sharing. So that's why I think those two projects going forward in tandem are really important to address the concerns that matter to the Prime Minister around having significant emissions reduction, which has already been identified by the industry, but also creating a new revenue stream and new markets.
And I take your point on that change in sentiment and looking for new markets. I would point out that TMX has already had a big impact on that. Total crude oil movements from Alberta to BC more than tripled from May to December from the same 8-month period in 2023. It's a 367.4% increase. At the same time, I'll revisit my point. I don't understand the grand bargain, essentially. Why does there need to be a grand bargain in order for big, profitable oil companies to do the right thing when it comes to emissions? And why are taxpayers essentially on the hook through either credits or for forfeiting revenue that could be going to other things like healthcare and education? Why are we on the hook for that?
Well, you can't spend money if you don't create it. And the energy companies create a lot of money for us. We get about $17 billion worth of revenue from those companies. So we want to be able to see the ability for them to create more of that. We've always had a funding arrangement with our energy companies that allow them to recover the cost of construction of their oil sands operations before they have to pay the higher royalty premium. We've always had these kinds of mechanisms in law. And so putting forward a proposal as we had with the carbon capture utilization and storage tax credit, they'll be able to get a rebate of 12% of the cost. That's very much in keeping with the kind of supports that we've given in the past. I think the advantage this time is that they can now see the potential for new markets. And if you can have $20 billion worth of sales year after year after year for 20 or 30 years, that's a pretty good value proposition. So I'm happy to link those two so that we can get both projects going ahead. And I think it'll be good for the country. And it will also put us in a position where we have the lowest carbon barrels in the world, which I think should open up some additional markets for us. And I think that's what this is all about, is trying to find new markets so that we're not 100% reliant on the United States.
One of the factors that contributes to the sort of revenue cost calculation of carbon capture is the industrial price on carbon. You freezing it has had a negative impact on that calculation. Are you going to unfreeze it?
I have to tell you, it was going up at too high a rate. And if it kept on going up at this rate to $170 by 2030, there would be no investment happening in Alberta. In consulting with the industry, we thought that freezing it at 95 was about the right amount. As you know, the federal government is writing contracts for differences with companies to guarantee a price of $86.50, so it's above what the guarantee is. And when I would just point out, Quebec's carbon market traded last year at $41. So we're already double the carbon market that exists on the other side of the country. So I think that we're prepared to continue working with industry to set that rate at the right level to incentivize the kind of investments that we want to see. But it can't be so high that it ends up killing all of the revenue generating investment. I think there's a balance, and I think that we have found it. I hope that we're going to be able to see these projects go forward on that basis.
But again, that has an impact ultimately on the profitability of carbon capture, which, if you are having a negative impact on that, further relies those companies on money, again, that could go to other things from that pipeline you're talking about, or even through tax credits that your government and the federal government is offering. Like, why are we in that cycle?
Well, that's what I mean. That's why you need to have both go at the same time, because if you can earn revenue by selling more product to Asia and Korea and Japan and China, then why would that becomes the revenue stream that helps justify the cost associated with carbon capture? So there's different ways to be able to go about doing this.
But that revenue could do other things. That's the point, right? You made the pitch initially that it could build the roads, build the hospitals, build the schools, and now it's instead going to go to oil companies.
Well, 100% of zero is zero, Vashi. Like, if you don't end up with production and you don't end up with revenue, there's nothing to divvy up. You have to begin with production. You have to create the environment where energy companies feel like they can get product to market and they can make money at it, and then we all benefit. But at the moment, we've had a situation where we've had cancellation of pipelines. The cancellation of Energy East, of Keystone, of Northern Gateway. That would have generated 2.5 million barrels a day more of production than we have right now, which would have been $55 billion of revenue that we don't have to talk about who ends up getting what share. I don't want that situation to continue. We have to get these projects built, and then we can talk about what the relative amount is that should go to different levels of government, First Nations, the company itself. But I can tell you for certain, if none of these projects get off the ground, then we'll be in the same position that we have been for the last 10 years, watching missed opportunity go by.
I just quickly point out, according to Statistics Canada, for the fourth consecutive year, production of crude oil and equivalent projects reached a record high in 2024, up 4.3% from 2023. I do really quickly want to turn to asking you.
I just want to say we have an aspiration to double our production, and we could have been at already probably 6 to 7 to 8 million barrels a day. That's what I'm looking at. And why should we hold ourselves back when we know the world wants our products? This is the time for us to build them.
Yeah, I guess I'm just countering the idea that things are destitute or that nothing is being developed or production is extremely capped. Like, the numbers bear out a different story. They're not perhaps as high as you and other people in the province or maybe even across the country want to see, but they're not going down.
Actually, we've got the lowest living standards in the world. Like, we're falling behind all the OECD countries in productivity growth and standard of living growth. And that's because these are the kind of projects that consistently fail and do not get built. So we can't sugarcoat that. That is a reality. If we want to be a rich country and we want to be able to keep up with our neighbors in growth, we've got to build things. We've got to dig things out of the ground. We've got to get products to market. We can't keep on borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and watching the kind of situation that we've seen over the last 10 years develop. That is not what Albertans want. It's not what Canadians want. And so I think there needs to be a complete attitude adjustment about all of these projects, because we've lost a lot of opportunity across the board, across the country.
Okay, I'll leave it